Topic?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yes. Hi. This conversation has been made possible by IAMAdoptee in collaboration with Connect-A-Kid. IAMAdoptee seeks to connect adoptees with resources, information, and community. And Connect-A-Kid is a national organization that provides an incredibly and valuable resource through mentorship program for adopted kids.
Great, thank you, Kathy. So my name is Katie Naftzger, and I can say a few words about myself, and then Kathy, maybe you could just introduce yourself briefly. I am a Korean adoptee. I'm a psychotherapist in the Newton, Massachusetts area, and have been working primarily with adoptees of all ages and adoptive parents for a long time, like 20 years or so. I also wrote a book, Parenting in the Eye of the Storm, The Adoptive Parent's Guide to Navigating the Teen Years. And yeah, I'm excited.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Katie. I'm Kathy Sacco, and I have, like Katie, I'm a social worker by background and have over 20 years experience working in adoption with specialization in child welfare, and then having done adoption, foster care adoption, intercountry adoption, and then also worked in policy related to intercountry adoption. So I'm happy to be here and excited to be part of this conversation.
Yes. So what we wanted to get into a little bit today was, since when we're recording this, we just finished New Year's, and so we were kind of reflecting on the holidays and just thinking about what the holidays are like for international adoptees, internationally adopted adults specifically. And we wanted to just share some of the reflections that we've had, and really some of the maybe goals that we might have as international adoptees in terms of making the holidays, meaningful to us and something that we look forward to and enjoy. Kathy, did you want to add anything to that, or are you?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly. It's just, I think particularly at this time of year, and I know that in IAMAdoptee on our website, that we did a call out for just kind of checking in how intercountry adoptees, dealt with the holidays and things, and just some of the different things. So I think we'll be incorporating some of those reflections that adoptees submitted to us that I found really profound and helpful as we're going through this.
Kathy, did you want to start us out with one of those from the website, and then we can?
Sure. One of the things I think, and I know Katie and I were talking about this, just some of the reflections. So, one of the things, for instance, is that Anna was talking about that as an adult, the memories of holidays that resonate strong are the self-implicated obligations and stress of having a perfect Norman Rockwell Christmas. And that really resonated for me, just thinking about I guess the expectations, what expectations do we have for the holidays, of the Norman Rockwell Christmas, of the perfect Thanksgiving, and how that ties into the losses that we have as adoptees. And I think I had shared with Katie, actually, my sister and I, we were adopted from Korea. I was 5.5 years old, and my sister was 9 months old, and we actually arrived on Christmas Eve. And interestingly enough, I think that we didn't celebrate the Gotcha Day, and it wasn't really talked about in our household. Every once in a while I would say, oh yeah, we arrived on Christmas Eve. So it's interesting. I think the holidays were really kind of technically wrapped up in our arrival into this country, but it wasn't really addressed. And not, to be honest, it's not something that I think about necessarily. But I think too, this Christmas in particular was poignant, or these holidays actually was poignant for me, because I lost my mother, or adopted mother. She passed away November 9th. So it was the first Thanksgiving, the first Christmas where she was gone. And it was bittersweet in the sense that because she's had Parkinson's and dementia, so she had really been gone for the past 3 years. In a way that I had lost her, 3 years ago, just because she had deteriorated so much. But still, it was really the first holidays where she was physically not with with me here in Baltimore. So.
Yeah, and I just think about the pressure that we might feel to experience some of the feelings that society tells us to experience. That the happiness of family, generosity, giving, relationships, celebration, joy, and tradition. And when we experience significant losses, or when Christmas means a lot of different things to us, depending on what Christmas was, in the beginning. I just think about how kind of how much despair there can be in that discrepancy of, on one hand, the Norman Rockwell, on the other hand, there's a lot not said. There are losses. There's a lot of grieving, and there's a lot of feeling of sort of starting from scratch.
Absolutely.
One of the themes that we are thinking about, and there might be things that people have submitted on the website that may speak to this as well, is this experience of feeling like an outsider in your own life, in your own family, and even in your own community. I think that, as international adoptees, we often don't look like our parents, our adoptive parents, and we often don't really fit in easily to even our community, or maybe other, others who are in our race technically, but maybe not culturally. And so, just that experience of feeling like an outsider compared to the message that we get about Christmas and other winter holidays, that you belong and that you can have this close-knit, cozy, again, Norman Rockwell kind of feeling.
Absolutely. Joy had submitted on the IAMAdoptee page, and I thought this quote was profound. She said, "The performance of the holidays, that as an adoptee, one who is gratefully going home, makes me sweat a little." And I think that's so true. I think particularly too, I know in looking back on my life and having kids and things now, but I think at the time, I felt like, yes, I needed to be grateful that I was adopted. I needed to be a good adoptee, and to show that my parents made the right decision in choosing adoption. And I think that weighed particularly on the holidays, of having the picture perfect holiday, or being grateful, so.
Yeah, and in a way, silence can sometimes speak volumes. As you had mentioned earlier, it wasn't talked about a lot. It's not like, it was nor celebrated or nothing, like it wasn't celebrated or anything, really wasn't even acknowledged, really. And I think for us as adult adoptees to become aware over the years, kind of the intricate, deliberate steps that we take not to be abandoned, to be perceived in a certain way, to create a certain atmosphere, like in the holidays, and the pressure that we put on ourselves because we feel like the stakes are so high, and to feel like we're doing all of this without even really realizing it, or maybe a lot of our life, certainly maybe a lot of our childhood, that we really have no idea that we're going to such great lengths to make sure our adoptive parents feel good about their decision, to make sure that this person in the grocery line, feels like we're a good customer, or it's pretty exhausting, actually, when we do kind of really face all that we do just to survive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kathy, did you want to read one of the other entries or
Sure.
comments?
This was one from Kase, who was adopted from Ethiopia. And she wrote, "At this point in my life, I'm also dealing with conflicting feelings about being adopted and being separated from my culture of origin and its traditions. So I have found myself feeling unhappy about what I lost, and that Christmas is no longer being the same, and also what I felt that was taken from me from her Ethiopian traditions," for example.
Mm-hmm. So I think that can be also another loss, Kathy. I mean, you had sort of mentioned when you're a child and when you're an adult, and sometimes, obviously each of us has had our own experience as kids, but sometimes it can, childhood can kind of just go along, and you don't really think about it, and you don't really even totally recognize what you've lost, or what you might even be angry about, or all these other kinds of negative feelings that become more clear, when you're an adult and maybe a little bit more separate, maybe a little bit out on your own, maybe even having your own family or your own partner or your own place, in your own work and stuff. How interesting that can be, and how much of a difference that can be when you move into adulthood and realize, wow, this is not what I thought it was. It's almost like Santa or something, you have a certain idea, and then when you grow up, you realize, wow, this is really not exactly what I thought it was. And, you can really find yourself kind of starting from scratch in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was actually a number of adoptees who, when they had submitted their reflections, talked about that. So, for instance, Holly, who's adopted from Korea, she said, making new traditions with my family, children, and husband, and keeping those traditions from my adopted family that I treasure and skipping those that I don't. And then Kim had also, he had talked about finding a way to balance those traditions, for his son, now. And he says, so what have I kept for my son? I make it a point to go back every year for my son, so he experiences all the things that I did. But then he also says, now that I'm divorced, it's harder to take him back, but I like it that now we alternate Thanksgiving and Christmas for him. I started a father-son Christmas dinner and Star Wars Advent Lego calendar. So I really, that resonated for me too, because I think I was thinking about how I wanted things different for my own children, and what traditions or things, so for instance, I made, I think starting in 8th grade, I would make a quiche to eat Christmas morning. And so that was a tradition that I wanted to keep in my family, and so that we do with our daughters. But then there's also things that are different. So for instance, I grew up most oftentimes as being the only Asian, along with my sister in the community. So I think we've made choices about where we live, why we wanted to be in Baltimore and more of an urban setting, so that there's more diversity for our children. Mm-hmm. So I think you're absolutely right as far as thinking about what have we done or had as children, but then now as adults or with our own families, new things that we're trying to make things different or better.
And how can we make our holiday our own holiday, as
Absolutely.
opposed to a performance, as Joy had mentioned, or the Norman Rockwell picture, which is almost impossible. Kathy, you had an example of a time recently when you felt like sort of an outsider in a way that was unexpected for you. I didn't know. Would you be willing to share that?
Sure. So, the holidays were really hard this year. Like I said, before my mom passed away, November 9th, I lost my dad over 6 years ago. And then my mom passed away, like I said, at the beginning of November. But then a month later, almost to the day, my uncle passed away, my mom's oldest brother. And so I went back for his funeral and things. And like I said, it was all more poignant, I think, being right in between Thanksgiving and with Christmas coming up, and thinking about for myself and my family, but my extended family, that they had the losses of two, both my mom and my uncle. And but anyway, going to the funeral, it's in a small Missouri town, and I looked around and found that I was the only Asian person. And and this is the way I grew up, but not how I've chosen to be as an adult. But it just stuck out, and then made me very uncomfortable, because I wanted to just be able to focus on my grief and the process of grieving for my uncle and for my mom, really. But then having to look around and feeling people were staring at me and wondering why I was there, or that I did not fit and belong in this family, in that place. So.
And it really takes you back, because I think most of us have experienced that a lot, and but maybe more as kids in some ways, because again, we choose to live in more diverse areas, or we choose to have friends who are not just white, or we choose to we have more choice now, but it really brings you back, and it's sad when it interferes with the emotional journey that we need to take.
Yes.
That you had a need in that moment, and it felt like it was getting kind of taken away from you in a way because of this whole other thing about being an outsider in a way that you hadn't felt in quite some time, especially in a family event.
Absolutely.
And I think about, the new normal, that part of, our making the most of holidays in our own way is trying to kind of recalibrate expectations in order to create our normal, that whether it's illness, whether it's death, whether it's marriage, whether it's whatever, some other crisis or loss, or whether it's just how we're feeling, about ourselves in terms of mental health or our life. Sometimes we're in a position to really need to accept where we are in our life and to go from there, as opposed to getting locked into the shoulds that that we're all susceptible to. I should be happy, I should be grateful, I should be moving forward, I should be in college, I should be happy to be a mother, or and that sometimes those things aren't always possible. And I think that our task as adoptees really is to accept wherever we are in that particular moment, as hard as it is.
Right. No, and that reminds me, Whitney had talked about, I don't want to say boundary, but in a way of what they needed to do, right, to make it healthy for themselves. And so Whitney shared, while it can be misconstrued as selfish, we prefer to spend the holidays celebrating in our own way versus in an airport or driving hundreds of miles, just because that's what you're supposed to do this time of year. And I thought that was great, and it sounded really healthy. And her, in being an adult, saying, this is what I need, this is what's good for me and my family right now.
And I love what she said about kind of misconstrued as being selfish, because I think that when we make a change that is more for us and not as much for other people, when we say no to someone whom we've said yes to every year, for our entire lives, and then we're saying no, or no, only 3 days this time, when we start doing that, it is common for someone to perceive it as selfish.
Yeah.
Like, you don't care about the family, you don't care about being together, you don't care about, and that is, I think guilt is one of the challenges in, making the holiday your own and recalibrating your expectations to be sort of appropriate for where you are in your life at that time.
Right. Absolutely. And Melanie, another adoptee, she shared, today the ones who get an invitation to our shared table are not out of obligation or pleasantries, but through delight, enjoyment, and authenticity. So I found that the more genuine we become, the more we attract those in our lives that can hold these spaces. And I thought that was really profound.
It's really beautiful. It's very beautiful. And I think that, we're trying to remember that, wow, we have a choice. We can say no if we choose to. We don't have to say no, but we have a choice and we can do that. And, I think that, we're also challenged to maybe shift the meaning of the holidays from, more of the generosity, joy, gratitude, celebration to really acknowledging how hard of a year it's been, or really acknowledging everything that you've been through, and whether it's loss, whether it's illness and other kinds of crises, and really appreciating that. that sometimes things aren't there isn't much, it doesn't feel like there's much to celebrate. And so when we can't celebrate or feel like we don't have anything to celebrate, we can acknowledge and appreciate that we're here, that we've made it through another year, and that is how we can recalibrate expectations. We don't have to do a treat, we don't have to do a special soup or dinner or something. We can do whatever we want and acknowledge it in whatever way that feels helpful for us.
Absolutely.
So the other thing I was thinking too is, that ideally our holiday would reflect who we are. It would reflect our identity. And I think that is one of the many challenges that we face, is trying to have a sort of cohesive identity that makes sense, even though there are all these different aspects to it that don't really mix very well. So there's the whole Korean piece, then there's the culture, and then there's our adoptive parents, and then there might be our current family, our partners and kids and what have you. And it can be a little bit, it can feel like we're being pulled in a lot of different directions. And
Mm-hmm.
so, ideally, we want to really reflect who we are as a whole during our holiday. So, some of us might want to find ways to acknowledge our birth mother, even if we don't know her. Some of us might want to, journal about her every night, before Christmas, or make Korean desserts, instead of American desserts, And so I think that the more honest we are, the more authentic we are, and the more that it's reflected in our holiday, the happier we are, I think, in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's the interesting thing is that when we actually live more truly to what we want and how we feel, and then yes, the happier we are, or the more comfortable I think that we feel. So,
And I think it takes a lot of courage.
oh, absolutely.
If we're coming from an abandoned kind of place, and we feel like, in a way, the stakes are so high that we can't really afford to lose
Mm-hmm.
another family or another parent or another person in our life. We can't afford to have that happen. We can't afford the feeling that we could have done something different to avoid that. I think it takes a lot of courage to say no when it doesn't feel right for you, and to have the holiday you want, even if it means not flying 400 miles or whatever. It takes courage to do that, given that, we have a lot of fears about being alone, about feeling abandoned, about being abandoned, and a lot of maybe sometimes questions or doubts about our worth. And, it can feel like relationships can really help that and bolster that. And so if we're saying no, I think that can be kind of anxiety provoking, and yet it feels so good when you actually do it, because
Right.
you know that you're being true to yourself for once, which
Mm-hmm.
is, can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack sometimes, but it can happen.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Are there others that you wanted to read, or did we cover?
Yeah, I think we covered, you know, the the ideas that people were bringing up a lot, which was about loss, which is about expectations, and then how do you live that, and kind of incorporate all those parts of your identity and your community and your family and who you are,
Mhm.
and um, making it more true to yourself.
Great. Okay,
Yeah,
good. Well, I'm so glad we had a chance to talk.
I did. Yes.
And yeah, okay. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.